I'd like to start with two cases. The first one is taken from the 2013 Barna survey in the US. They conducted a survey among young Christians and how they use iPhones and iPads. And they realized that 70% of them use those new technologies and bring those new technologies when they go to church. And they download a Bible app. And while the sermon is given, many of them double-check the information given by the preacher. On the other hand, another research has been pointed out that some atheist youth are downloading a similar app as well, because they use it to speak to some Christian classmates in high school to point out some mistakes that people might make and use those apps. So what I'm trying to do in this paper is try to start understanding the impact of those new technologies, but within neoliberalism. And hoping that I will fit this within 20 minutes, I'll speak to you about neoliberalism and the perspective I'm taking for this paper. Then I move very quickly on religion and neoliberalism to argue that religion is part of neoliberalism. And to try to understand those new social practices that use those technologies, I go back to Ritzer's theories of the McDonaldization of society and try to update it, a kind of aggiornamento of Ritzer's theory in a way. And then I'll move on the last slides on speaking on the neoliberal post-secular project and come back to Habermas' notion of post-secularism. So I hope you're ready for the ride. There's a lot of concepts that I'm going to cover, and please turn on your mobile phone, use the Wi-Fi, and you're more than welcome to check everything and go and check any apps as well while I'm speaking. So here, as a way of introducing this paper, this is something I got from Facebook. Great tool of research, Facebook. You get information without seeking it. And this is a picture in 1979. The hard drive. You can see the size of it, the weight, and it used to cost tens of thousands of dollars. 2013, and I'm sure technology has improved since. Here's this microchip that you can hold in your hand, only $11. And it's not even 1 gram. And it can hold 64 times more data than the hard drive from 79. You can imagine the difference that it makes, not only with technology, but the way we use information and technologies. And here I'm making reference to the work of Marc Auger, this anthropologist, who speaks about technological changes. And he argues that the second half of the 20th century have seen more changes culturally, social, and technological than since the birth of humanity. And he even pushes his argument further by arguing that instead of looking at periods of 50 years in terms of changes in technology that affects the way we live in a society, we now have to move into shorter period of time, maybe 10 or 15 years. So this is what I'm trying to do in this research, is trying to understand the impact of those recent technologies on religion for the last quarter of a century. And also I want to speak about neoliberalism. And because what I'm arguing is that this is what underlines those use of the technologies and the impact on new social ways of being. And here I make reference to the work of Raymond Connell on neoliberalism. And here I quote, "We live in a world of markets. We are constantly told and have to do what markets require. Modern subjectivity is about selling the self, creating marketable narratives for Facebook, YouTube, and the next employer. Corporations not only buy and sell in markets, but they also create internal markets and profit centers and constitute their workers as mini firms, contractors. Government itself has to act like a firm, scale down debt, sell off unprofitable assets, lure foreign capital, and make a financial surplus. The modern university has to find a new business model to become entrepreneurial, to produce what the market wants," end of quote. I'm sure that this quote resonates a lot with your professional life, and there's no need to go further on that. But what I want to aim at is speak about differences in neoliberalism. This is not just one, if we can call it an ideology, one ideology. It changes, it's movable. That's why I'm moving to the second quote. 30 years after Thatcher and Reagan, 20 years after the peak of the Washington Consensus, and 5 years after the global financial crisis, neoliberalism has certainly changed, end of quote. So what I'm trying to do in this paper is not speak about the neoliberalism of Ronald Reagan, of Margaret Thatcher, but the neoliberalism of Steve Jobs, of Mark Zuckerberg, of Bill Gates, and try to understand the impact, not on the creation of the technologies, but the impact on the use of those technologies. There's been research already done on religion and neoliberalism, and here I've put some covers, some books. There's Olivier Roy, for example, who is quite explicit in speaking about the standardization of religion as an effect of what he calls the Protestantization of religion. He said that Islam and Buddhism have been Protestantized. He claims that Christianity has been Buddhized. Example, where you've got Christian yoga, and some groups are using Yahweh as a replacement for Eastern mantra. He also speaks about that book about halal McDonald's or Mecca Cola, and he argues, who's winning, Sharia or the fast food industry? In that book, he questions the use of consumer society on religion. Mara Einstein on branding of faith speaks about the increased competitive market between religious groups for members. She makes reference to, in the US context, more than 80% claim to be Christian, but around 30% will regularly attend church. What happens to those 40 to 50% who do not attend churches? And she speaks about some religious groups that are market branding themselves to tap into those non-church goers. And that's why she used this great expression, from pews to pixels. They use modern technologies. They use tools for marketing to appeal to all generations, but specifically to the young ones. And here I don't have the time to cover everything, but these are some researches that really ground the notion that religion is part of neoliberalism. And what I like to do now, after I've been setting the foundation, is go back to Rizzo's thesis of the marginalization, a thesis that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And to summarize it, it's got 4 main points: efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control. So Rizzo used the notion of calculative rationality from Weber. And Weber used this notion to understand the growth of bureaucracies in the modern world. Instrumental reason, calculative rationality. And Rizzo, in the 70s and 80s, adapted Weber's understanding of calculative rationality to argue that calculative rationality has moved out, and still there, but has moved out as well, of large organizations, of bureaucracies, to be part of our everyday life. We just have to drive down a couple of streets to go to a McDonald's to be faced with this calculative rationality, this instrumental reason. And that's why Rizzo was speaking about the marginalization of society, this idea that we're surrounded by this calculative rationality outside of the home. And to argue his point, he spoke about the increase of companies, small companies, or even groups of people as well, of the efficiency, of capability, of predictability and control. A great example is when you travel and you go to the airport. The carousel is a fantastic place to observe marginalization at its best. It's efficient, you land, you have to grab your suitcase very fast until, before the next plane lands. Calculability. The airport wants to optimize. People who use the airport want to optimize the amount of planes. And they quantify the amount of suitcases they receive and the speed as of which they deal with the suitcases, so they try to improve themselves. Predictability. Don't you feel you're going to the same airport anywhere when you're traveling, especially when you go and grab your bag? And control, you've got cameras everywhere just to make sure. And of course, an outcome of the control is standardization. And here's a joke is that when you're in the airport in a carousel and you've got people coming from all parts of the world, I can never remember which suitcase is mine because they're made by the same company, I believe. They all look alike. And of course, I put some strings to be able to find my suitcase, but everyone is starting doing this as well, so it becomes quite complicated.